Hello, everyone. So, another week, another Fabric coffee session at Microsoft Fabric Cafe. My name is Merdad Abdullahi, the community lead and the organizer of this great community. I'm super excited to be with you guys with another Fabric coffee session. So in the meantime, just say hi and let us know where you're connecting from. Let me just add something here. Make everything ready. Cool. So, same as usual, I'm gonna just jump into my slides, doing the introduction, and then I cannot wait learning from Steve. So today, September 27th, 7 a.m. in Vancouver, Pacific time, the session number 46 at Microsoft Fabric Cafe, and we are a part of the Microsoft Learn community. If you don't know that, so it is a tech community. It is the richest community for just learning from experts, learning from your peers, sharing your knowledge with your peers. And for the Microsoft Learn, for sure, it is the richest place to just find out for all the Microsoft and Azure technologies and whatever that falls in that landscape. So there are the different learning groups that you can just join and start discussions and ask your questions, help others, and get support from your experts. One of those learning rooms is Microsoft Fabric Cafe. So of course you can join us there, and we try to have the weekly Fabric coffee sessions. It falls in the weekend, for now, at least until the end of this year. Then we can just have a survey to have a poll to just know what is your preference for having the sessions during the week or even still on the weekend. We have almost 5,000 members around the world. We focus on Microsoft Fabric and Power BI. So we provide learning and support to Fabric users in all levels. So it is a forum for everyone to learn, share, and grow skills together. Here is our links and for our social accounts. We have the YouTube channel, which is with the handler of Microsoft Fabric Cafe. We have all the recorded sessions, all the upcoming live sessions are there. You can of course rewatch them and share with your network even. On our LinkedIn page, where we do our announcements, where we do, actually share our experiences and from Microsoft Fabric, from Microsoft Learn, and any news that is coming through is on our LinkedIn page. And we have two groups in the tech communities, which is Microsoft Community Group, and also in Microsoft Fabric community. You can also find us there. And lastly, in the meetup group, that we've got is for the RSVPs for the sessions. And the important thing is related to rating the session, which is going to help us to understand how we are doing our sessions. And please let us know if you think, if you have any suggestion for the sessions. Please let us know. It is very open discussion. There's a code of conduct, when you attend the live sessions. Thank you very much for adhering to all of these guys. I'm not going to read them. The past session with James Sarah was a fantastic one, using GenAI on structured data. And it is available on our YouTube channel. You can watch it or rewatch it if you miss any part of that. And for today, we've got Steve Campbell, and he's going to just introduce the version control, Git, and Power BI developer mode. I know most of you guys know are waiting for that. I'm gonna just invite Steve to the stage. Hey, Steve.
Hello, good morning and good afternoon, evening to everyone.
Yeah, welcome to our cafe. Finally we've got you.
Yes, yeah, we've been
While that
planning
I'm
for a while.
chasing you.
Yeah, we've been very busy lately, but very happy to be on and grateful you invited me on here today.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here, and your contribution to the community. It is really appreciated. Steve, so you've been in FabCon. Tell us about your experience in FabCon, and what was we were also the speaker there, and tell us about your experience, and what was the most maybe important or most your favorite part of the announcements or the features.
Yeah, definitely. Luckily, I got to speak at both FabCons this year. So just last week, last week, been at the one in Vienna in Austria. Very cool to see it over here in Europe. I live in the UK here. So really cool to see so many Microsoft people as well, especially them all being based over in the States. Going to hang out with a lot of really cool people. Um, Lots of fun announcements. I come a lot from kind of the Power BI world as well. Got some new DAX UDFs. My favorite was talking with Rui Romano, who is actually the PM, funny enough, on Power BI project. He's been doing some really cool stuff with AI, a lot in private preview, but you'll see some stuff coming out, or public preview, I should say, soon. A lot of cool AI stuff, kind of interacting with your files with code, right? Helping AI to actually write code and update your models for you. So I think that's really, really cool stuff coming in
Yeah,
the future.
yeah, for sure. When everything is going to be combined with AI, that is making it fantastic and unpredictable. Wow, what's going on? With this AI tool. So yeah,
Yeah.
awesome, awesome. Thank you for sharing with us. So everyone, yeah, we've got Shanuk from Texas. Yeah, awesome, awesome, awesome. And from Nigeria, welcome everyone. And please summary for Power BI developer mode. So yeah, it is one of the items that Steve is going to cover. Steve, I don't want to waste the time. So I let me share your uh, screen, and yeah, stage is yours, guys. Ask your questions. We've got Steve here today, and yeah, let's learn from him and ask the questions. Ask the questions. I'm just repeating that. Ask the questions, which is going to make this session more, interactive and have more engagements. And for sure, and don't hesitate to ask your questions. Go for it, Steve. I'm going to learn from you.
All right. Thank you so much for the introduction. So today we're going to be talking introduction to version control, Git, and then talking about Power BI developer mode. You don't hear the term Power BI developer mode as much, but this refers to the new PBIP, which is the Power BI project. It's sort of everything they've done in the Power BI files to make it enable to use Git. It's not the only reason they did this. There's, as I said, the AI stuff, you get a lot of cool stuff. But one of the features is now we can use Git. We're not going to be just talking about Power BI. So for the most of it, we're going to be introducing kind of what version control and Git is. Maybe you've used it a bit before. Maybe it's brand new to you. And I want to explain it, hopefully, in a nice and easy way. So we really understand what this is. And then we'll see a demo of us actually using in Fabric with Power BI. So about myself, as said, my name's Steve Campbell. I'm actually the co-founder of Analytic Endeavors. This is a data consultancy I co-founded with my business partner, Reed Havens. So me and Reed do a lot of speaking together. He's been on YouTube for ages, and we do a lot of videos together. We're actually based out in Seattle, Washington. We do sort of end-to-end data platform stuff. So I spend most of my days sort of looking after the back end more so, and a lot of data engineering, starting to use a lot of Fabric now, which is pretty cool. The Microsoft MVP in data platform. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and that's where I share lots of stuff, what I'm doing. So if you did enjoy this, come on LinkedIn and you'll see loads more kind of free training videos and stuff like that. Okay, so let's get into the session. And before I actually dive straight into Git and everything, I just want to start by talking, funny enough, about semantic models. So I just have a really quick couple of slides just to set about semantic models and kind of what's involved. This is going to be necessary later once we talk about Power BI developer mode. So within a semantic model in Power BI, let's say we have an import mode semantic model, we can have two items. One of these items is going to be the data. And so this is a copy in import mode of the data from the source, right? And it's basically a backup file, data copied into, in this case, the local computer and Power BI desktop, reviewing the service, obviously the model there. We can't actually edit this data directly. We can write Power Query and tell the engine how to edit it. But once the data has been imported and there, we don't actually edit. We just kind of add things, or we can write DAX and stuff like that. And it's stored in a column store format, right? And the other side of a semantic model is something called the metadata. And there's this new format called Tyndall. And it's just text-based code files. So this is stored alongside the data. The new format is called Tyndall. This is just the text that is all the code that goes alongside the data. The old format was Tyndall. The Tyndall format, TMDL, is the new format, which is a lot easier to do what we're going to do today. This is all the metadata of the code about the Power Query, DAX, roles, anything that we write in Power BI desktop, it gets stored in a text file. And this tells Power BI where to get the data and how to aggregate it. So this was a bit of a prereq to this session, because it's important to distinct these two, because when we talk about Git, Git's always about text files. We'll be seeing that. We can only really do properly Git and version control like this on text files. And that is what the metadata is. That's what Tyndall is. Tyndall is just a language, right? We have JSON, we have other languages we can store in text files. Tyndall's one specific to Power BI. So when we talk about Git, we talk about text files. With that said, let's start talking about Git. You may be familiar with this scenario where we're working probably with a finance team. I'm going to pick on finance teams here. I used to work in finance. We have something like the budget stored in an Excel file. Then people are updating this budget. They're not sure what they're doing correct. You've probably seen this sort of thing before, where we're making loads and loads of copies because we want to keep the original version in a good format, but we want to check that what we're doing is correct. This becomes very unmanageable. And then if you think, hey, this is me, the one analyst, there's all these different people, right, working on different files, different stuff, emails are pinging around, it gets very confusing. What is the answer to this? We need some sort of version control, some sort of source control to help manage and get us out of this mess, stop us getting in a mess like this. One option, we could all have a centralized file. We've seen this a lot with things like SharePoint. It's making it really easy. OneDrive, where we all work on the same file. We can have sort of version control of it. We have a central point to work on everything together. However, Git is a little different. Git is what we call sort of distributed version control, which means that rather than just having this one central file we all work on together, we all have copies of the code and we work on it individually. This works really well with text files, and this is why Git's really good at text files, such as code files. It's really designed for code. That is Git in a nutshell, really. We all have our own files and we all work on our own copies of the file. Then we have a central area where we say we've made our update. We make a copy of the central file, the central text file. In this case, it would be the Tyndall of a semantic model. Take away on our own computers, make our updates, and put it back into the central one. That is kind of Git. And the whole thing about Git, though, is how do we manage that? Obviously, we can't just all copy it and overwrite the central one because we'll all be doing different things. So what I want to do first is I want to go through some terms in Git. And I'm just going to explain the basic terms of all the Gits. And you'll hear these terms a lot. I'm not going to dive into code, don't worry. You can do this all by writing the command line. Not going to dive into that. We're just going to do this very visually as we go through. So the first terms I want to talk through is a commit, a merge, and a repo. So these are common terms you'll hear. All right. So imagine that we have this. We have this central file, which is the main file. And we all there's 4 of us, Git's all about multiple developers working in a single file. We copy the file into our own computer. And that's sort of identified up here. We'll call this the local machine. Git, one of the big things about Git, which is somewhat less of an issue now, but could be, is that it's offline as well. So you don't need to be connected full-time to online to the central version. So obviously that central version has to be stored where everyone can access it. We can actually copy the file and copy it onto our local machine and make edits. We have a file here with some very basic code. This is actually a very simplified version of what Tyndall looks like. And I said we're not going to look at the code. You don't have to understand it. But one thing that it shows, and you can see, is that there's 2 columns here. So imagine this is a model, and there's 2 columns within the model. I will then initiate Git. Git essentially is just a small little database that I run on my machine. So I can go and install Git, and that's something you'll need to do. It's open source, it's free. You can go and install Git, and all it does is it makes a little database on your local machine. So I install Git onto my local machine, have a little database there. What happens then is I'm going to save different versions of my code into the database. This is then, for example, saved version 1. So I've saved it into Git, and it's saved the version text file like it is into my little database. I might make an edit. In this case, I've added a new column, you can see here. So I've added the column product name, not building a semantic model or something, I'm making files. I will then save this again. And this is going to be called saved version 2. Maybe I delete this column and saved version 3. So what I'm doing is I'm just making edits. I might not have to write the code. Maybe I'm using Power BI Desktop, but behind the scenes, it's code, it's writing code. And I'm just clicking in my Git tool save as I'm going along. So in this case, I saved each time I made a change. And I'm just saving it into this little local database on my machine. The good thing about this is that everything here is saved, and it saves the copies, and it's not overwriting on the database. It's saving each version. So I've said, oops, I didn't mean to delete that column. I made a big mistake. I can actually do this, and I can roll back and say, let me see what it looked like when I was at saved version 2. So it's very non-destructive. even if I delete stuff, save it, it's just saving lots and lots of copies. This is without me having to put my initials after it, without me having to change the file name, because this little Git database is managing that for us. And every time we save it, it's saving a new copy. And this is what is a commit. So it's called committing. One thing about Git, it's quite confusing if you're new to it, because they seem to use some very confusing terminology, which doesn't really mean the same thing in the rest of the real world. And that's what we kind of try to demystify a bit today. Where we regularly save each versions of this, it's actually called a commit. So when we click save, it's making a commit. We're doing this locally. So when I say locally, I mean, not online. It's on our computer. It's in a folder, and you'll see everything's about folders. We have a folder with Git installed. This little database lives in a folder, and we're saving into the folder. So it's all on my machine right now. Somewhere, though, we have the main copy of our code. If it's a semantic model or a Power BI report, for example, as I say, people don't see the code at the end, but behind the scenes, it's all just code. So we have the main copy, which is, the version that people are seeing online. And this is stored in a repository. Repository, most people just call it a repo. So the repo is kind of online. It's the main version where everyone, we as developers can access. And then we're having our own version locally on our machines. So the repo is where we save the main one. And then once we've made our edit on our local machine, obviously we don't want this just on our machine. We want it to show everyone. And we want to change this and say, I've taken a copy, I've worked on it on my local machine, I've made lots of commits, which means every time I make a change, I do little saves so that I can roll back if I made a mistake. Once I'm happy there and I think, yes, what I've done is correct, I can then merge this back. And that's what a merge is. So I'm going to save my version that I have on my machine. I'm going to save it back into the main copy of our code, the repository or the repo. This is not replacing the whole file, and we'll see this. The beauty of Git is that we're only actually updating the very bits of code that we changed. This makes it a lot easier, as we'll see, for multiple developers to work on it at the same time. Because if we work on different bits of the code, we're not just overwriting the main file, we're actually just changing the little bits that we worked on. We're going to see an example of this. So we commit, we copy it into our local machine, make our edits, commits, then we merge it back into the repo. That is the basics of Git. And what we can do, for example, is we can save this into Power BI developer mode. So if we're doing this in Power BI, we have something called Power BI developer mode. I'll show you where that is, and it's called a PBIP or Power BI project file. What we have to do is we have to use some sort of editor that allows us to use Git. So Git is just something we can install. I'll show you an example later, but I might use something like Visual Studio Code, which is an editor. It's just a program which lets us do the Git stuff. So I initialize the Git database, right? I make the little Git database in my machine, and I make commits locally. Again, I don't have to type the code myself. I can see the code under the surface, but I can use Power BI Desktop. And Power BI Desktop, as I do stuff in Power BI Desktop, it's going to change the code for me. And then I save versions of the code in my little Git database. This means that as I'm using Power BI, I just need to open this in the background. I can open Power BI, make changes, save it in Git in the program in the background, and I can actually have multiple versions, and I can roll back anytime. Then once I'm happy, right, I can upload and merge it back to the repo. Cool. Check for any questions so far. Okay, good. Now, I mentioned that version control in Git is really designed for multiple people to work on a file at the same time. How do we do that? When we say we all work on our local machine, we need to do this in a way which makes it safe for us all to edit. And that's where branching comes in. If you've heard of Git and used Git, you'll hear the term branching a lot. What we have is we have the main copy of our code in our repo, we online. So we have the main copy of our code here. This circle represents the version of our code. So right now, if we had, for example, a semantic model, we have one version of the semantic model online in the repo, and this is the one that will go out to the end users. I might say, okay, we need to do something to the semantic model. Maybe we want to add a new table. It's a complex table that might require a few people to work on it at the same time. Instead of me updating, the main copy of the code, what I can say is we can say, let's create a copy of the code. And this is called a feature branch. It's called a new branch. I'm going to call it a feature branch because I'm adding a feature. A feature is like a new table. It's something I'm adding. So I make a copy of the code in something called a branch. You can think of a branch as just another folder. If you had it on your local machine, it would be like making a new folder, copying the main one into that new folder, and working on the copy. The good thing about this is if we do screw it up completely and we realize we've done completely wrong, we can just delete the branch and it will be like nothing ever happened because it hasn't affected the main copy. You will notice on Git that what we do is just make copies of stuff so that we're not, it's very safe. We can edit things without messing up. However, let's imagine that this table, it's got a lot of complex calculations. It's going to take us a bit. Whilst we're doing that, someone else realizes that one of our DAX measures is wrong. The KPI is wrong, and this is going to our CEO. So this is really, really important that that measure needs to be changed. What happens is we might open another branch and say, okay, these people over here are working on the feature, the new table. I need this hot fix. I call it a hot fix because this is a bug that needs to be fixed as soon as possible. You'll notice in this hot fix branch, I've copied the main copy of the code. So it doesn't have any of the new table that they're working on. This hot fix, I've identified the error, the developers changed it. What they do is then they merge that back into the main copy of the code. So their hotfix branch, they just changed the one measure. They updated it back to the main copy of the code because they were happy that it's fixed. And so they wanted to say, yes, this fix, we'll put it back into the main copy, so we'll go out to the end users. Meanwhile, the people working in our feature branch are still working on that feature branch. And they might now have finished a new table. You'll notice that their new table was added to a different version. So this is the version that they copied, but then this hotfix has now been updated. So this version here is different to the copy that they took when they took for their feature. However, because what they were working on hasn't updated the DAX and it hasn't affected anything that the DAX, that one measure was, and they're working on different parts of the code, they simply added a new table. They can merge their feature branch back into the new copy of their code. And that new copy in the main branch now has both editions, which were worked on separately. And Git's all about managing this. If they'd worked on the same thing, we would have some conflicts, and we'll see how that works. So let's do this with an example. We have code, and code works on lines. So text files, code, Kindle, is semantic model. It could be any code though. So this isn't just for Power BI. This is any code files, any text files. They have line numbers, right? Every time you open code, you always see the line numbers. This is a very, very simple code. It says, hello world by, all in their own lines. We've said we want to make an update to this code. So the first thing we do is we create a new branch. Again, this is all online in the repo, in the main version. So we create this branch. We copy the main one so that we're not updating the main branch. We're not updating the one people are seeing and potentially messing things up. This is called a new branch, right? And we check out the code. It's just check out the code to a new branch. So I have this branch now. And this branch is where we're going to do the changes. I then make a copy onto my local machine because the copy is what I'm doing. So the branch lives online in the repo. I'm going to make some edits. So I copy it into my local machine onto my computer so that I can work locally. So my copy is a copy of the branch, which itself is a copy of the main. So I'm working a copy of the copy. And you'll see this really helps us stop messing anything up. That's all Git. That's a big part of Git, just to make sure that we can always roll back. We call this, again, terminology, remote. That's the one in a central location because the remote's the one that's online. It's remote to me. And the local is the one on my machine. So local's me, remote's the one online. So I have my copy. This part, if you're going to forget anything, forget this. It's important because you'll see this terminology, and I just want to explain it. I said we make little commits, and we save it to the database. They call this, the one we're working on, the working directory. You then have a potential staging database before we do the local repository. So this isn't really important, but you'll see the word staging. Staging is just sort of an extra step that when we save locally, it saves it to staging and we can review it before we save it. So sort of another area to do another review. You don't always have to use it, and normally we don't, but it's there. So you'll see this word. It's just sort of an intermediary step to save it so we can check it before we finally save. To get back, we've checked out the branch to make some edits, and now I've made my copy. I've been working on it, and I've now updated line number 2. So I've updated the second line of the code. However, it's not just me working on this code. There's 2 of us because, this is really complex. There's 2 of us working on it together. Dave is also here. Dave also has his own copy. So the branch is the one which is online in the repo, the remote. And then me and Dave both make a copy of the branch onto our local machines. This also requires communication. So obviously we should know what we're both doing if we're both working on the same code. Dave then runs and updates line number 1. So we've been given different tasks, different lines to update. Dave writes, hey, for line number 1. So Dave's copy now reads, hey, world, bye. My copy over to the right reads, hello, planet, bye. Because it's both on our local machines, maybe we're telling each other what we're doing, but we both have different copies. Dave then says, I want to, I've done some changes. I want to make sure that everyone else can see them. So what he does is he performs this push action. And he says, I'm going to push my code back into the main branch. So he merges his changes to the main one. He only changed line number 1. So he's only going to overwrite and change line number 1 in the branch, in the main, the remote branch here. This is important because he's not just saving over the file. Git is clever enough to see what's changed and only change the bits that he updated. So now that I want to do my changes, I think I'm happy. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, actually, I want to check if Dave's done anything. And I want to check that his code and my code work together. So what I can do is I can actually perform a pull action. So you'll see here, we have the main branch. I have my code, which I changed the second line to planet. I'm going to pull. So I'm going to say any changes which are in different to my version in the remote branch, pull them into my version and update my version. So I actually have Dave's change on line 1 and my change on line 2. Obviously, if we both updated line 2 and try to update the same line, it would say, hey, you've both done different changes. There's a conflict. And we would actually have to manually change this, and we would have to talk to each other and say, oh, we've both done the same line. So this is why it's important that we work on different pieces of the code. And that's, fairly easy. If we're saying DAX measures, I would update these 5 DAX measures, you update these 5. We're working on different parts of the code. Unless we're working on the same bit, we just need some communication to make sure we're not doing the same. I'm happy. So I've looked at Dave's changes. I have my changes in there as well. So, and this is the pull action, as I was saying, sorry, to check my local version and pull any changes in. I'm happy now, and I'm going to make a push action. And now I'm going to push my changes, which is the planet, back into the branch, into the remote branch. So that's how me and Dave work on things at the same time, updating different pieces and collaborating together. So we just push to update the changes, pull to get changes. In reality, we normally do a sync, which does a push and a pull, because normally you want to, update my changes plus see any other changes at the same time. You don't really need to do this one at a time for most cases. So normally we do a push and a pull together called a sync. Now, me and Dave are happy. We've done our changes. This is though on that branch. So we're still working on a copy of the code. I now want to say, we've done our branch. Let's update this back into the main one, because the branch isn't viewed by anyone. It's just for the developers to make a copy of the code. Let's add this back into the main, right? Update it, and then it will go out eventually to the end users. However, as another step, and Git's all about this, lots of steps, also checks. Me and Dave worked on this. We think it's correct. We want to, though, have a check. And we do something called a pull request. And we're saying we're requesting this to be pulled into the main branch. We basically say we're done. And it's just a review process. So somebody else on the team, who wasn't me or Dave, is assigned this, and it's their job to look through what me and Dave have done, read the code, look at the differences and say, is this good? Is this bad? And have me and Dave done it correctly? Me and Dave will also, every time we commit, and we'll see this later, write comments, and we'll describe what we've done. We make pull requests and commits and messages. So we've written lots of messages on what we've done. And then we've also provided the code. So someone will read our messages, look at the code and say yes or no. If they say no, they say, hey, you've made a mistake. Or they say yes, they say, this is good. We can change this back into the main branch. So again, merge back. Developers basically just submit the changes to be reviewed by a team and also include comments. And this is a pull request. All right. So that is sort of the key parts of Git there. One thing I want to talk quickly about is GitHub and Azure DevOps, because this is a Microsoft topic, Microsoft lecture or chat. I want to talk about these things. So Git itself is the system. It's the process. Distributed, because we're all working copies of copies locally. And it's for these tracking changes, right, in collaboration. It itself is open source. So it's not owned by a company. Git's very popular. It's not the only type of version control out there. It's, I would assume, by far the most popular one, especially for software and code. GitHub is a product. I've said we need somewhere to store the repo, right? The repo lives online. this has to be somewhere. We need these tools to do a pull request. We need some sort of UI to open a pull request. We need a way to manage this so not anyone in the world can just work on our code. This is what GitHub is. It's a platform for Git, and it basically does Git and managing and stuff like this. Way more involved when you get into it. There's loads more options that you can do. This is now owned by Microsoft, so they actually bought GitHub. We also have Azure DevOps. This is, again, another platform, another product. You can go to dev.azure.com instead of Azure DevOps, and it does Git and repos like this. Azure DevOps is also designed for sort of planning, project management, stuff like that, on top of just doing Git. I really like DevOps myself personally. We use it quite a lot. And this is also owned by Microsoft. You don't have to use GitHub or DevOps. There's GitLabs and a lot of other stuff out there. These two, though, are very popular because we're talking about Fabric, the ones we're going to focus on. And Git itself is just the process. One thing I want to show you as well is I said we can compare code and we can see what's changed and what hasn't. We do this with something called a diff compare. There's many different instances where we use a diff compare. But basically, when we say I'm going to do a commit, I'm going to do a merge, we can see side by side the code, and it's going to highlight anything that's been deleted in red and highlight anything that's been added in green. Does, of course, require you to understand the code a bit, but I can see that at the top, actually, no, you can't see the top, but this is a column that's been deleted. And then this one on the bottom here, I had old price calc, which was actually DAX measure, you can see here. And then I've deleted the old price calc and I've added new price calc. And this is another DAX measure. So you can see, I can see that I've actually deleted the measure here and added one. And then all the code down the bottom on the right, and you will see highlighted red and green shows you bits which have been changed. And at the top here, it says there's 25 deletions and 11 lines being added. So these are diff compares. They're used in any time we have two different versions of the code. Very useful to double check what's been added. And we'll do this along with notes and stuff like that. Okay. All right. So that is Git. Now I want to talk about using Git in Power BI. It's not just for Power BI, by the way. Up until now, everything we've talked about hasn't been any product or even Microsoft specific. It's just the basics of Git, just how it works. Now we're going to talk specifically about Power BI as an example and how we can use Fabric can enable us to use Git in Power BI. So we have, let's say, Power BI running on our local machine. We have a PBIX file. Power BI developer mode is the not common used anymore. We call it a Power BI project, or a PBIP, generally is the term we're using. But this is the format, and I'll show you this. And it's a feature. It's in some of it's GA, a couple of things are still preview. But it's the format that we can save a Power BI file into, instead of a PBIX, into code files. Everything I said, right? I said we need the code files, the text files. This only works on text files. PBIX obviously is not a text file. So we can't do Git very well on a PBIX because it's just a program file. Internally, it's actually just a zip file of text files. But this Power BI project, and we save this into something called a Power BI project. This separates my Power BI file into lots of folders and lots of little text files. It's a lot easier as well, instead of just having one big code file, to have lots of smaller code files. If you can imagine, if I'm looking at the changes and I just have one big file with thousands of rows, it's going to take me a long time. I might get confused what I'm looking at. If I split this up, maybe I'll have one file for every table. Makes it a lot easier for someone reviewing it to check what's changed, and I can kind of quickly know what we're looking at. So this new format lets us save our Power BI files like this, and I'll show you actually split them out. You can still use Power BI desktop, and if you're using desktop, you wouldn't know behind the scenes when it's done, unless you actually looked at the folder and looked inside it. Then I need a tool to use Git, right? Git isn't a part of Power BI. It's for all code. It's not part of Microsoft. We need some sort of tool to do Git to make that little folder. We're going to use Visual Studio Code. Don't have to. It's one of the best. Visual Studio Code is also free. Really, really cool. So I really recommend Visual Studio Code. I really like it. And a lot of people do too. What we then do is Visual Studio Code kind of acts as this link. It installs that little database and does Git. And it also lets us link from our local machine to our remote repo. And that's how we link our folders and our stuff up into that repo where we have the file stored. We're going to be using Azure DevOps. Again, you could use GitHub or a number of other tools. In this example, we're going to use DevOps. This is where, this is Visual Studio Code. This is kind of what it looks like. I know it looks a little scary, but don't worry. This is where we do these diff compares and stuff like that. Then what's really cool when we use something like GitHub or DevOps is that we can actually link this to Fabric. And so this becomes our new workflow. Instead of us publishing our PBIX files directly to Fabric, we use Git. We actually publish them and we sync them, merge them to Azure DevOps. Fabric and Azure DevOps can sync automatically, and Fabric can tell if something's been updated in Azure DevOps, and it will automatically reflect that in Fabric and vice versa. So we can use Git without having to publish stuff and do everything through Git in a nice way. With that, I think we can go through a quick demo. Any questions so far? I just see a couple of things in the chat. Yes, developer mode to be a game changer.
Not a question, actually. Maybe like comments, mostly from Sam, as someone who managed multiple Power BI developers across regions. Task distribution was a challenge, which of course it is, and avoiding conflicts and merging works, was painful. Developer mood will be a game changer for them. Yeah.
Yes, a lot of people felt your pain. It was a big thing not having this available. Very, very true. Yeah, it's been challenging if you worked in big teams. So definitely has been a game changer. This has been an awesome addition.
Yeah, and a question from my end for you. So you talked about the feature branch, right? So do you recommend to have, for example, 2 features in one branch and in one push, or you would recommend to separate the features to be more safer? What is your, because sometimes the developers become a bit a bit stingy of maybe having different features and push them and wait for the approval for the pull request and all those process. And some days they prefer, okay, let's consolidate all the features in one branch and then push everything to the main branch. So what is your experience on that, and what do you recommend?
Yeah, great question. I would say the best practice is to try and have them as focused as possible, and sort of as small as possible makes it a lot easier to manage. There's always a best practice versus real life, but if you're in kind of teams and generally need some sort of product managers to help run that kind of stuff, very focused feature branches. And you'll see feature branches, they don't stick around, right? You open a branch, they do the changes, you close that branch and it's deleted. We do another feature, we'll open a new branch. So the more focused the feature branch can be, the easier it's going to be to manage for other people to sort of check what you've done is correct. If you try and do too much, if only one thing's wrong, we can't do the pull request. And so it gets a lot harder if there's too much in that feature branch. So very good question. So keep it simple, keep it as small and focused
Yeah,
as
for
possible.
sure. It is, what I always, tell to the team at work, that let's keep everything simple, small, and manageable. It is
Yes.
much easier to manage them. Of course, it is going to have some, admin works. It is going to add more tasks for the managers to review, or for the code reviewers to add the comments. And of course, there are more things to do, but maybe it is the best practice, as you mentioned. Yeah, keep going, please. No,
Yeah.
actually, there is a question
Thank you.
from Sam that I guess you will cover that, but Sam asks, just curious, will dragging a visual in Power BI, actually a file from left to right, triggers a change that needs to be committed?
Perfect question, Sam. And I think that's what a lovely segue into the demo. Let me example exactly that.
Yeah,
So I'm
cool.
going to go through the demo. Let's look at an actual file with Power BI development mode. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open Power BI desktop, and I'm going to save this in Power BI developer mode in a Power BI project. So here I have a Power BI file. Just to let you know, if I go to options and settings and options, you'll see here in preview features, we have this option here, right? Power BI project. So we have the Power BI project save option. So it lets us save it using the Tyndall format, which is the new format. And then the PBIR is actually the same. So Tyndall is the format for the semantic model. PBIR is the new format for the reports, the visuals. A lot of this stuff is GA. This is kind of the save options. Double check it whenever time you're watching this. If you're from the future, hello, watching this on repeat. Some of this may be by default by now. So I have this on. I can just go and save. I'll have the option to save as a PBIP. So if I go save as, and I just browse this device, I see here, I have the option here, PBIP. I've already done that. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to just show you what it looks like. And this is it. So I saved this, didn't work out very well. I saved this into a folder. You'll see here, I've actually got two reports in this folder. So I have my sales report and my sales semantic model. That's my PBIP. It saved it because this Power BI file has both a report and a semantic model. This is got some data in it, and it's got some visuals. This file here is the PBIP. This isn't really anything, but this is how I open it on Power BI desktop. So by double clicking on this, it works just like a PBIX, and it opens the file. It's basically just the shortcut so that I can actually open the file itself. This is how I open it. All the data is stored in these two folders. If I have a look in there, I can see the report. There's a bunch of stuff, right? You can see all the bookmarks get their own text file. All the pages get their own folder, and each visual on each page gets its own folder. Has a mobile version, which I assume is how you see on mobile, and a visual. So again, I don't have the new PBIR function turned on. And so it actually isn't in JSON, it's in different kind of formats, and it's a bit easier to read. But this is my sales report. I also have the semantic model. You don't need to know how the structure of this specifically, and you don't need to know how to read this, but these are all the text files underneath the surface that basically make up my folder. I also have a transaction report in this folder, so I have two files. So this transaction report, in fact, is one just single report, and then I have this sales, which has a report and a semantic model, and it's split it all up. You can see here, though, this still looks like a Power BI file to me. I don't need to actually understand what it's doing behind the scenes. I have the PBIP. I can still use it as I do in Power BI. So that's what I've done there. So the next part I need to do is open this in an editor, because the PBIP itself just splits it into multiple files. I've already installed Git on my machine, and you can just Google Git and just download it running in the background. And I've installed Visual Studio Code. Then from Visual Studio Code, I can simply just look at my files. Again, no Git yet, but this is just opening the files. This is Visual Studio Code. If you've not seen it before, it might look a little scary. Don't worry. We'll be seeing lots of code. We don't have to read it. But you can actually just go File. You can see Open Folder here. And I've just opened the folder. What it's done, you can see my folder Git demo if I zoom in. And this is just, as you saw, right? This is just all the files in that folder that I showed you earlier, where my report is saved. My 2 reports, sales and transaction. If I open, for example, the semantic model, I might go to tables here. You can see it's clearly in the semantic model folder in what is called definition. You can see tables. These are the table names that I have in my folder. And you can see if I open store, I can actually look at the code underneath the service. I don't really want to edit this because I don't know how to write this. But I can if I want to inspect stuff. So I've read it. Then I need to do this initialize a Git database. So I've saved it into the format. I've opened in Visual Studio Code. And within Studio Code, the reason I use Visual Studio Code is I can manage Git. So here, there is a source control tab. You can see on the left here, right now I'm in the folders tab, and that's why this is a folder. This is just like opening it in any other folder, like a text notebook, a notepad or something, right? But Visual Studio Code has this source control option. I click that, and it says, I don't have a Git repository, so I'm going to initialize this. And what it's done now is I've actually created this little Git database. And in fact, I can actually see that in my folder. There's a hidden folder, .git. And so this is that little database. Really glad it saves everything. Please never go into this. Don't mess with this. It's not for you. That's why it's hidden. I just wanted to show it. But it is there. This is where it stores all the data. So I'll have multiple of these across different folders, right? If I had more folders of different projects. But this one this is the little database I'm storing. Then, so right now, saved it, put Visual Studio Code. I'm reading the folder. I've made this new Git database. I need to make a commit locally because right now my database is empty. I've not saved anything here. I've just created it. And so I need to do this commit. So save the current version. You'll see here now, what it's got is it shows me every single file that's changed. And you can see here changes at the top. It says changes, and it lists all the files that changes. Right now, that's every single file because my database is empty. So everything is new, right? So I'm just going to write, and here I can write comments. And I'm not going to go into good comments and stuff like that, but I'm just going to call this initial commit. Commit, and then click commit. What this has now done is now it's saved it into my Git database. So just to answer the question as well, I've saved everything here. This is just local right now. What's really cool about this, though, is maybe I go back into Sam's question. I can say, let me drag a file. Let me drag this visual from the left and put it over here. I've made a change, right? And this is updated the code under the surface. If I go back, let me save this. If I go back, right, I've saved this code and I've updated, I can actually see now that it's made some changes. And look at this. This is obviously the visual. It gives it a GUID, and I think they're getting better at the format. You can see the X and Y has changed, right? And I actually dragged it. It kind of resized the height, I guess. You can see here what I've changed, and I added some new stuff. I must have added some sort of filter configuration accidentally, but I can see each file that I've changed. I changed the two files. And you'll see a couple of things, local settings. This is just sort of unnecessary and you don't have to mind. So now I can commit my second change, which is it moved visuals, and I'm going to save this into my Git database. Now that I'm happy, I can initiate my DevOps and sync my code into my repo. So I am going to find where I put my Azure DevOps here. Yeah. So this is Azure DevOps. I've created already created an Azure DevOps instance, and this is a project I have in Azure DevOps called Demo Git. You'll see on the left, because this is Azure DevOps, we have things like boards and pipelines and tests. So this is all the other stuff. We also have repos, and repos is where I actually save everything. Right now, this is brand new. I created it just before this. And it says this is empty, right? Because this is the online one. I haven't done that sync yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this URL and I'm going to go here. I'm going to say to it here and remote. And if you want to see how to do this step by step, you can follow along, or you can just Google. It's lots of steps out there telling you how to do it. But basically what I want to say is for this Git, this instance, I want to link it up to my Azure DevOps instance there and my project in Azure DevOps. I'm going to add my remote. I'm going to paste in the link, and it's going to ask me to give a name, and just call this demo Git. Great. So now I've just created that sync. So now I've synced it up to Azure DevOps. And what I need to do now is actually push the code up and say, copy my Git database into the Azure DevOps and populate that. And I do that with this publish branch. So I can initial commit here, right? I'm just going to give it comments. I'm going to say publish branch. So now what I've done is, I read my files in Visual Studio Code. I made the little saves. I synced it up to Azure DevOps by using the URL that it gave me. And now I'm publishing to it. So if I go back here, maybe I hit refresh, here's all my files, right? So this is now in the remote world, online. I've copied it, sort of like a publish. Last thing I want to do is then make this change and sync this up to the Fabric workspace. Let me go back. I have a nice Fabric workspace set up. It's empty, nothing in it. I'm going to click here on workspace settings. I'm going to click Git integration. And it says which Git provider, right? And GitHub and Azure DevOps are the options because I'm Microsoft. It's going to say, which one do I want? I'm going to use my Git demo. I'm going to choose demo Git. So you can have multiple projects, of course. And so you align a project to a workspace and those folders within it there. Demo Git's the repository, and it asks me which branch. So I can actually sync this to a single branch. Main is normally the one that has the main copy of our code. It's probably the one we want to use always. So I'm going to sync this to main. So this is just looking at the ones in main. That's why when we make a new branch, it's not going to show up here until we do a pull request back to main. And that's the beauty of branches, that we can actually do all this, collaborate before we actually sync this all up. I'm going to connect and sync. And what it's going to do is it's going to go, and now it's reading, right? This. So this is this line here. The Fabric workspace is now syncing up with Azure DevOps. It's now syncing across. Synced. Lovely. So you can see there, it's got my semantic model sales, the sales report, and the transaction report. One thing just to note is we spoke at the very beginning of data versus metadata. I've opened my sales report. Everything's blank. This works on metadata only. So we're not syncing up the data. Imagine if we had to do this with a massive gigabyte of data every time. It'll be too long. And that's not what we want to do anyway. So I will need to obviously refresh my data set. And now this is putting in on Power BI because this is metadata only. And you can see that it's very quick. I go back to my sales, refresh. Here I see all my report. If I wanted to make a change, so let me go back now. So I'm in Power BI desktop on my local machine. Let me maybe just make some changes here. Delete this. Let's make this be pink, right? And make this much bigger so it's very obvious what's changed. 88th. There you go. Let's delete this here. Make the title the main thing. Right? So I've made it on Power BI desktop. I'm going to save this. I'm going to go back now to my Visual Studio, and I need to first commit this locally, right? So save it to my little database. So deleted tons of stuff. I'm going to commit that locally. And now it's saying to sync changes. So this is saying, do I pull any changes in, push my changes back up to big edit here, back up to the Azure DevOps. And you see this, right? It pull and push. I'm like, okay, that's fine. And I'm going to sync my changes back up to Azure DevOps. If now I go back to Power BI, if I go to my workspace, you see here it says update requires. It's Power BI workspace has identified that something on Azure DevOps has changed without me having to go to Azure DevOps. Normally, I wouldn't do this directly. I synced it directly to the main branch. You can see here down in the bottom, it says I'm connected to the main branch. Normally, what I'll do is I'll create my own branch, do a pull request, all of this. I'm just doing this for the demo, so I'm not bothered about that. This is now saying in Power BI, let's update that all. So now I'm updating it from the Azure DevOps. And if I go into my sales now online, I see my new report updated. So this is sort of the new format that we're using. And this is now we're not publishing directly from Power BI or PBIX. We're going through Azure DevOps so that we can have all this commit. We can see everything that's being done. A couple of tips I want to go through, and then maybe we can go on to any questions. My biggest tip, set a strategy per workspace that aligns to need and skill. Actually, I think I see a couple of comments in very rightly so. Not everyone's going to know this in the business world. This is good for sort of when you get into larger teams. If you go into something like consulting, this is a skill that you really should have and know. And if maybe you get a new job in a big team, this is something you need. If you're in a little business with 2 Power BI people in the whole business, maybe this isn't, maybe use SharePoint. So obviously you use Git. Don't force it on everyone who doesn't know how to use it. So use some method though for every workspace. Git's great. And if you're not using Git, use SharePoint. Don't just have people store things on their local machine and just save it in, on their desktop. That could go with anything though that you do, right? Anytime you're working, use some sort of version control. And then have at least a separate dev and prod workspace. I do see a question on how this integrates with development pipelines. What we have here is, if you're not familiar with kind of dev and prod workspace, we would have maybe 2 workspaces. Normally you have 3 or 4 or more, but in this example, let's say we have 2. We have a dev workspace, and this is where we use Git. The dev workspace is just for developers. We use Git, we check everything in. It's then on the development workspace. We can then use something called deployment pipelines to copy our reports from one workspace to another, to test it first, and then copy it to prod where the end users work and use it. So this gets things just on our development workspace. I'm not going to go into it full much. If you don't know what I'm talking about right now, don't worry that much. But this is Git we normally use on a dev workspace, and we use deployment pipelines then to push it out to end users as another step to test things again before it goes out. All right. With that, I think that's it. So thank you very much from us. Please connect with me on LinkedIn here. If you liked it, or if you didn't and you want to tell me that you hated it, also connect and give me some feedback. But no, this is LinkedIn. I'm very active on. Also our website if you ever want to chat with us. We do training, interpretation, stuff like that.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Steve. that was great. Of course, people love it. As I can see a comment from Danny. Love you.
Thanks, Danny.
Cool. Thank you very much. How I actually like about your presentation is that how you've broken everything down. To the small pieces, even starting from the terminologies, and it was a nice, really introduction to Git and also the version controlling in Azure DevOps or even GitHub. That was great. Thank you very much, Steve. Guys, if you've got any question, please feel free to push it in the chat. I'm gonna just share my screen again. Our session with Steve is almost done. If you have any question, just back to us, and it is available on our YouTube channel. On Microsoft Fabric Cafe YouTube channel. We can rewatch it if you need more, information, or if you have any question, just ping Steve on LinkedIn. Who's going to answer them for sure. And our next session will be with Pravin Kumar Bandi. He's going to talk about engineering intelligence at scale. So it is already announced on our meetup group, but yeah, some posts are going to be on their way for the announcements as well. But stay tuned for this one. And for our again, YouTube channel, LinkedIn page, Microsoft Tech Group, and Microsoft Fabric Community Group, feel free to join there. There are some questions coming through. A comment from Sam. That was absolutely great session. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us, and also
thanks, Sam, and thanks for the really good questions as well.
Yeah, and also nice video from Oni. And can we have the links to view the all presentation? Is there anything?
I think this would be your YouTube link. I guess would probably be the best for this.
For sure. It is the YouTube channel. It is available, on the our live section. But if you're asking for the presentation file, I'm not sure. Please make it clear.
Yeah. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn if you do want anything else. Obviously, you can watch this on repeat as well.
Awesome. Cool. Maybe, Steve, we can use this session as a foundation for your next session. I'm just going to reserve that for the next session to dive actually deeper to talk about the version control and maybe the best practices in higher levels to see more challenges. Maybe for a session, we can come with a common challenge in the teamwork. When people are working in different versions, they want to touch, or they're waiting for a feature to become available first, and then having another feature added to that. These are the challenges most of the teams, the big teams, where then we have multiple developers who are working on the same file or same project. However, it requires a great strategy, a great project management, and in place. Of course, it is not going to be done only by developers only, but it needs a nice coordination, between these developers and the business people.
Yeah, I think you said it great there. Strategy, project management, communication. Definitely, you really need those. And I think I would say this as well. It's becoming really more important with AI, which is just updating a bunch of code without you really know what's happening and seeing things before they can actually break stuff. So this, I think, having all of those becomes even more important in the world of AI we live in now.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And yeah, Sam is maybe adding a suggestion, maybe how to resolve conflicts in a more productive way, or even
Yeah,
better, how to avoid conflicts. Yeah,
awesome. Yeah, great
cool.
ideas.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and we're waiting for your review on our meetup group for this session. Thank you very much for everyone for joining, and thanks Steve for making yourself available on your late Saturday. So yeah, if you want to add something, feel free. If not, we can just wish everyone a great weekend.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a good one.